All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Speak Black Man podcast. I am your host, Jason B. Allen, better known as Professor JBA. Now, go ahead and subscribe to ETV, educationalentities.com, to get connected to all of our upcoming episodes of the Speak Black Man, and all of the podcasts are part of the ETV network. Now, listen, our hearts and minds, thoughts and prayers, resources, and also information of ways that people can connect with family members who are in some of the areas that have been hit by the residue of the hurricane and the tropical storm that has come across several states, especially Tennessee, North Carolina, parts of Georgia that are flooded and without power. We are definitely praying for everyone who is working in emergency services, which, interestingly enough, we will be talking about that on this evening. But our hearts, minds, prayers, resources, ways to connect families, and other ways that people can be helpful in this time are definitely welcomed, and are really thinking about those fellow citizens who live in mountain and also rural areas that have been impacted by the recent storm. So again, hearts and minds, thoughts and prayers go out to them. I want to move right into Jay's Corner and community power, because listen, there's no community power if there's no UNITY. So we have to have unity, and our way in the Speak Black Man podcast of doing this is connecting people to upcoming events, also shedding light on small grassroots nonprofits that are doing the work for us and in our community. So major shout out to Barney Jackson and Every Color Matters. There is a 5K coming up. I want to say Saturday, October the 12th, 9 a.m. Go to the website, Every Color Matters. Check out the phenomenal work. Just a little bit, right? We're going into October, and October brings awareness to cancer. Definitely breast cancer, but also all kinds of cancers that people are battling. And so make sure you go to Every Color Matters. They have a phenomenal gala every year, but they have a 5K coming up October the 12th, which is a Saturday. If you are in Atlanta or in Georgia and want to come out and support this, go to their website, Every Color Matters, to get connected. I also want to say this for Georgia families: October the 21st through the 25th, the Georgia Parent Week of Action is returning for fall engagement for families and communities. Please make sure you're following us on social media, the National Parents Union. Get connected to what's getting ready to happen here in Georgia. You can email me at jason@npunion.org to get connected. I also want to say, last but not least, everybody, it is almost October, and the annual Halloween Masquerade Ball is coming up Saturday, October the 19th. It's going to be amazing. Live DJ, live music. The art auction is going to be out of this world this year. The food, everything's going to be nice. Fourth event for our foundation that is 9 years old, supporting grandparents and kinship families, caretakers raising school-aged children. So it's definitely a party for a purpose. Make sure you come out, get connected. LiliesFoundation.org. You can get tickets, get connected to what we're doing, and we're going to go from there. Now, this is episode 2 of season 6, and I am super excited to be on again this evening. Our special guest is no stranger to the podcast. However, we are going to have Mr. Pre-K come back in the season because his daughter is sick on this evening. And guess what? We believe in parenthood, but we definitely elevate fatherhood. So prayers are going out to him and his family as they take care of a sick child. If you are a parent or a caretaker, and you know how that is. So, hey, much love and many prayers going out to him and his family. Now, with that being said, we're going to hear more about Educators Now Fund, the work that they are doing across the South. We'll talk in that future conversation around economic stability and mobility through education. But we are going to get into on this evening conservative liberal, progressive. How do we meet in the middle? Definitely focusing in on civic engagement. Again, it is almost October. Early voting is getting ready to start. If you did not get your absentee ballots, make sure that you have wrapped that up. All of the deadlines have been posted. Uh, when we all vote has a lot of information. I'm actually going to challenge everybody right now to go to the National Parents Union's website, go to our Every Family Votes campaign, sign up, get information on not only how are you making a plan to go vote, but how is your family going to vote? So we have a lot of information we're going to be dropping on this evening because education is power and there's a lot of misinformation. Even though we are in the age of advanced technology and the age of information, there's a lot of misinformation that is going around. And so we want to clear that up and make sure that people are getting the information that they need. And most importantly, are connecting our communities with this information. So, Black brothers, I want to make sure this conversation is still geared around listening to Black men. What do Black men say they want in regards to elections, civic engagement? What are the voting topics? What are the key points? I want to always drive us to data. And so please make sure that you all go to Pew Research Center, PEW, like the church Pew, Pew Research Center. They have released data as of this month, it's still September, that is showing that Black men vote less than any other demographic in the United States. Again, I want to go over this to kind of start our conversation on conservative, liberal, progressive. How do we meet in the middle? We start with education. Pew Research Center, again, that's PEW, like the church Pew Research Center, recently showed data September earlier of this month reflecting that Black men vote less than any other demographic. Now, let me also break this down a little bit further. The last 3 years, we have had large numbers of Black boys who are young Black men. You guys got to check out episode 1 of the podcast with Javon, and he talks about civic engagement, especially with our young people. But we have a lot of young Black teenagers, a lot of young Black boys who are young men, in particular over the last 3 years, that have graduated high school and are not connected to civic engagement. So organizations that I mentioned, When We All Vote, are supporting student-led voter engagement and voter education. So young people are really connected to what's happening in regards to civic engagement. I also want to go over some information that a lot of people may not be aware of. Texas is the largest state of Black voters, followed by number 2 coming in as Georgia, right? Georgia is the second state that has the largest number of Black voters. We're going to talk about Stacey Abrams in another conversation, but just to think that, again, Georgia has the largest number of Black voters, but 7 in 10 of these voters are coming out and actually being connected. Now, I want to give some more data around the way that we are civically engaging men. We have 73% of 18-year-olds, so let's say to about 74-year-olds that are engaged civically in voting. 73%. Now, 96% are 75 and above, who are 96%. 75 and above are 96%. Like that age range, 96% of them are voting. I want you guys to follow this. From 75 up to, baby, you may be 105, right? From 18 to 74, 76% of people between 18 to 74. Look at the difference in generations and age gaps. Now, when we break that down again further, data shows that Black men vote less than other demographics. As the demographics change. Older black men are voting. Listen, brothers, I don't want to call anybody out, but between the ages of 68 to 38, we have a drastic drop in the engagement of men in those ages that are voting. But then it picks back up, and that's where the hope comes in from those who are younger, especially those who are young voters coming in to the fold of civic engagement. And so it's important, again, that we are having these conversations with men. How are we voting? Why are we voting? And how are we getting connected to conversations around voting? Now, I have really been pushing this. I'm hoping that parents are going to join in with having civics taught between 3rd through 12th grade. Every year, students, children, young adults, teenagers are getting information around why it's important to be civically engaged, why it's important to understand your local government. The Leadership Conference of Civil and Human Rights says this about voting rights and voting. They believe that voting is the language of American democracy. It is also the ability to participate in civic life. At our nation's founding, voting was enshrined only for educated white men who own property, which means that there is still a divide classism there, because you could still have been white and a white man, but if you did not own any property, you were not considered to be a voter. So think about people who did not own slaves, because that was a big part of being able to vote. Okay, see the connection there. Being able to say I own land, which also means that in that time, property also was equated to black and brown people, or however you may want to define that. That's a different conversation. Am I black enough for another podcast? But the Leadership Conference of Civic and Human Rights says that this right to vote was only for educated white men who own property. So in 2024, we have to look at data from organizations that are on the ground working with everyday Black American families. There's also an intentional push specifically on Black Americans not to vote, dividing us on issues, even dividing us on the civic engagement process. And I think that it's important for us to spend time on what are we actually voting for and why. So bear with me for a few moments. The Leadership Conference of Civic and Human Rights breaks down why we have a history of voting, why we need everyone to be connected to conversations around voting, and most importantly, why we should be doing this for the betterment of our society. Now, when people are complaining about what's happening in Gaza and we're sending money overseas and all of those things, it lets me know that we do not understand civics. Civic engagement is key. So let's go over some election myths and some facts before we get into the actual process of voting and civic engagement. Here's some things that we have firsthand been seeing on the ground and hearing from people that have been receiving information in the mail, or maybe have others who have come up to them. So, will voters be turned away if they are wearing campaign apparel? No, you cannot be turned away if you are wearing a campaign button, shirts, hats, or any other items to the polling place. Now, excuse me, I know in some places like Georgia, because again, we have governors that we vote for locally who can make laws that impact us on the state level, especially around voting rights. There was an issue around such thing as like water being provided to those who were standing in long lines waiting to vote. Let me also state this, where a lot of times we make this a black and white issue. Let's go by, again, Pew Research Center, that's like Church Pew, PEW, shares that disenfranchised communities. It's not always all black communities. It could be mixed race communities. People are saying, oh, we don't like black and brown, but we have a lot of black and brown communities that are disenfranchised but they're by their votes, that have longer waiting periods for their voting centers. But I also want to throw this in the mix for people that may not be considering communities that have high populations of Muslim citizens, mixed race in regards to black and white, poor whites that are not just in rural areas, but maybe suburban, maybe mixed inner city communities. Also have voting precincts with large waiting periods for them to have access to voting. I also want to remind everyone that those who are considered the working poor, who are working those essential jobs that everyone wanted to praise during the pandemic, but then after the pandemic, we went right back to neglecting that these citizens are not making livable wages, right? They also live in communities that are disenfranchised by the vote. And so when we think about the importance again of voting rights and voting, if it wasn't important, why is there so much put in the way of these everyday working families to get out and vote? All right. So I want to make sure that people are aware of that and also acknowledge that. Now, here are a couple of other myths that we looked at and we have heard from. College students need to get absentee ballots. No, you cannot go on your campus and say, hey, because I'm enrolled in this school, I should be able to vote. If your permanent address has not changed, you have to get an absentee ballot. Okay, so college students, if you are in a four-year college, a Christian private college, if you are in a HBCU, public, private, trade school, if you are in an institution of higher learning and your permanent address has not been changed, you must do an absentee ballot, or you're going to have to travel that distance to get home and vote. Those are your options. So make sure college students, those who have young people in their families who are away from home. I also want to say this. Absentee ballots are not only important for college students. If you have a loved one who is in extended care, hospital services, they need an absentee ballot. If you are a traveling nurse, or maybe a flight attendant, you need an absentee ballot. If you are a military family, and guess what? If you are a truck driver, you need to get an absentee ballot because this is important. Okay. Now, here's something else that a lot of people felt like they were getting phone calls about, threats of foreclosure of their home. And if they have foreclosure on their record, or if their home is at jeopardy of foreclosure, they cannot vote. This is a myth. It does not matter if they bring in a notice up to your house and you're walking out to go vote. You say God bless you and you take that notice, but you keep on and you go vote, because that does not qualify for you being able to vote. And I'm sharing this because these are real things that are happening. So when we think about Springfield, Ohio, Wake Forest, North Carolina, Waterbury, Connecticut, areas where, people are looking at, these are working families. So we can tell them anything and they will believe it. No, this is happening in too many places, and we have to, again, drive voter education. All right. Now, one last thing that I want to make sure I highlight, and again, we're seeing a lot of legislation that is attacking so many citizens, but especially the least of those in our society, and those are our homeless residents and families who are displaced. If a voter is homeless or they do not have a legal resident, if they have faced foreclosure, they've been displaced, they may have been in an affordable housing apartment complex that may be caught on fire, or whatever the circumstance may be. State regulation laws do not discriminate against those who are homeless or displaced. The same thing that would apply to children or young people who are in school. They cannot be discriminated against or turned down for services because they are displaced or homeless. That applies to those who are voting. So if you do not know, displaced families, that means we had a house, We had an apartment, we lost it. We are living with our sister, auntie, best friend, cousin, play cousin, god brother, god sister. I'm breaking down all of the nuances so we understand that if you have a cousin and their 3 children staying with you and it's been 3 to 4 months, they are displaced. They are not just sleeping on your couch, or they're not all packed in the hall closet or the guest room that is also grandmama or big mama's room, right? They are displaced, and they are also maybe classified as homeless. They still have the right to vote. So that is important. Now, this is myths, facts around voting. I want to get ready before we close out the conversation looking at the hour: conservative, liberal, progressive. How do we meet in the middle? We meet in the middle through education. Everyone should be educating people on A, their right to vote, and B, the process of voting. That is not taking place. I also want to say this. I get that everybody has their own beliefs. ADOS, foundational Black Americans, conservatives, liberals, but whatever you want to, whatever floats your boat, whatever, you know, party you want to align with, that's wonderful. But here's the deal. We all have the right to make sure that people are educated around A, the responsibility of voting and the impact of voting. Do not believe the hype of what you are seeing on social media and also the media. Education is the passport to freedom for a reason. You can't say that you believe in Marcus Garvey, Harriet Tubman, and a lot of the freedom fighters and liberators and not understand the value in civic engagement, not understanding political, economic power that connects to education. Again, I want to take us back to what the Leadership Conference of Civil and Human Rights says about voting in this country, that it was established and enshrined only for educated white men, which means that education is a game changer because it plays a major part in our voting system, but people are not educated. So let me tell you how I know this. When people are arguing about reparations and saying that Kamala Harris should be doing more about reparations in the presidential election, that lets me know that we don't understand civics. When we have a natural disaster and just a lot of the things that are happening, everything is the presidential nominee's fault. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. We do have processes, right? So let's back this up. Voting impacts 3 major areas. Federal elections. Now, federal elections are important because federal elections include the presidential election, which by far most people are locked into. They only hear about, they only think about who is running for president. But then we also have 2 other areas that are very important in regards to federal elections. Now, this isn't Civics 101, but maybe it is. And this also is good information to share out to a lot of people who are misinformed. 3 areas of federal elections: presidential, which is happening right now, U.S. Senate elections. U.S. Senate elections are also happening. But do we know who are running for these seats? We don't, right? So I want to put this out here. There are a lot of ads. Again, if you missed the conversation on last Monday with Javon, he talked about the different ads that are targeting young people. They're also targeting Black men in our community. They're targeting ways to disenfranchise. Let me also be very specific. These are people who they are trying to disenfranchise from the vote. People of color. Why do you think there's this whole argument around, oh, who's Black? Who is Black enough? Are you Black? Is everybody in your family Black? Go down the roster and check who's Black. So we have that conversation happening, right? But also who are disenfranchised are women. People with disabilities. I'm telling you, even the White House has a lot of work to do. As many times as we have gone to the White House this year with families who have disabilities, and I've had to walk with and be with families who are trying to go to the nation's capital and advocate for their families and their children, but there's not accessibilities for those who have disabilities. They are disenfranchised with the vote, but also Native Americans, indigenous people, and people who are low income. So it's not just black men who are being disenfranchised. A lot of people feel like there's an intentionality of making sure that black men are left out of the vote. And that's where we are misinformed. The intention is on making sure that black men do not go out to vote. And that is in the way that we talk about voting and the education around voting. Okay. So when we hear people saying that, oh, all of these issues are happening and it should be the presidential nominee's job to fix it, that lets me know right there that we are not connected to civics and we don't understand the process. So federal elections is not just the presidential election. There are U.S. Senate seats. There are House of Representatives. Now, who are your representatives? Who are your senators? Let me tell you that in Georgia, I know for a fact, we had quality people who were running, nonpartisan, those who were progressive, who were running. And let me tell you what happened. A, people did not get out to vote because they are being fed misinformation. And then B, they get disappointed in the people who are elected who don't have your interest in mind because they're working for the who's who. They're not working for the working poor. And that's just the reality. Ripley's believe it or not. All right. Now, we have federal elections. I'm going to wrap this up before 7:55. Federal elections, 3 parts: presidential, U.S. Senate, House of Representatives. Then we have state level elections that are always happening because they do not just happen on the federal election cycle. Why are these things important? Because your governors play a major role in your everyday well-being. Let me also say this. We have had 2 governors in this month execute 3 people, 2 black men who had substantial evidence showing that they were innocent. And then on social media, there was an intentional message saying that Kamala Harris should have done more to save their lives. I almost wanted to cuss because I need you all to wake up. The governors have the power. That is why it is state level elections. It is 2024. Our young people should not know more about this than we do in the age of information. If we don't wake up and understand that we have more black men who are incarcerated, and this is impacted by local elections and our governors, and then we have black people out of their mouths saying that you should not vote, you should sit at home, and then turn around and send us a message saying that my cousin Junebug and them are caught up in this legal case and we need support. Because you told people not to go out and vote, and then people that are causing our black men to be disproportionately disenfranchised in the prison system. Come on, we got to connect the dots. State elections are important. And here are some other key reasons why your state elections, hence your State Department of Education. Parents, when you're complaining about these school districts and the superintendents and the principals and the area superintendents can uphold policies that are wrongful against black children, specifically why we needed a policy to protect our natural hair, because if you have locks or an afro, they could suspend you or put you out of school. These are state level issues. So when we don't show up for state level elections, that is saying that we're just going to let any, Joe Blow go in office and impact abortion, which is also sex education in schools. Teenage pregnancy is going up, but y'all are jumping up and down celebrating abortions being banned. But do we not understand what comes with that part of the healthcare systems? Yes, it is the right for women to determine what happens with their body. It also encompasses the medicines, the healthcare, the treatment, the education. But why don't we know this? If we understood civic engagement and what state level elections actually impact. Climate action. Aren't we seeing these places flooding? Aren't we seeing towns and cities just Watch right on by. Climate action. If your governor and your state officials, I'm just trying to help somebody here, because what I'm seeing on social media, hearing in the barbershops, hearing in these civic events in the community, yes, our education system may be failing, but we are also failing ourselves when we can go right up to the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. We can go to these different research centers and say, why is it important for me to vote? Who are the people I'm voting for? What do they do? How can I hold them accountable? Speaking of this, nationalparentsunion.org, go to our Every Family Votes campaign. You can get all of these resources so we can make it easy for you. Let me also tell you that we had a school shooting, several actually, in Georgia. Firearm regulations are set by your state level officials. So again, when we have hundreds of thousands of voters in the state of Georgia, and less than 64% of people went out and voted in the state level elections, but now we are crying about these people who have lost their lives. But when parents and children and educators are saying we need better gun regulations, everyday people are not showing up to the polls to vote in state level elections. I'm telling you guys, don't believe the hype. You have to be civically engaged. We also hear this. My wife can't get off. We don't have anybody to watch the kids. My mama getting tired. We need help. It's too expensive. State level elections also impact paid family medical leave. This also connects to child care, child support. So black men, brothers, if you're complaining about child care, if you're complaining about child support, again, who you don't vote for, or who your rappers or your social influencers are telling you to vote for, if they're not supporting the things that, quite honestly, a lot of black women, a lot of women, a lot of people with disabilities, a lot of people in the LGBTQ plus community are advocating for, then guess what? It is also going to, in various ways, negatively impact you. Last but not least, the lowest level of engagement are local elections. Local elections that impact zoning on things like housing. So everybody is talking about affordable housing. But local elections are they have the least engagement, the least turnout. Zoning on your local elections, zoning that impacts housing, parks, libraries, that connect people to information when the power is out, or when people need to connect with people because the internet service in their community is down. Hey, the library system has ways for us to be connected. Local elections also impact law enforcement. Yes, they're saying give these people more money, but let me tell you right now, police officers, that police academy needs to be ran by someone different. It needs to have a different training mechanism, especially with the caliber of education that's embedded in the police force. No tea, no shade. And the people who I know that are police officers, the majority of them receive education outside of the police academy. Let me also say that if you go in educated, you come out as a better performing law enforcement person. I'm just being honest. Education plays a major role in law enforcement. Let's also look at roads. Let's look at emergency services. Again, Asheville, North Carolina, a lot of the emergency services were not in place. What was the budget behind that? How did we vote to support that locally and then on a state level? So when you're seeing all of these things on social media, seeing all of these things on Facebook, YouTube ads that are saying, hey, this is Asheville, North Carolina, and Kamala Harris as the presidential nominee should have been doing more for Asheville, North Carolina. What is the local budget? What did the state decide before we just jump to the federal government? And also understanding that who in the federal government plays a role in this situation. I also want to say that public transportation in this major area that has the least amount of people, the least amount amount of people show up for school board elections, which is the highest tax that we pay. Black brothers, intentionally speaking to you because I'm seeing a lot of things on social media talking about economic mobility and economic impacts. But no one is encouraging you to show up for school board elections. What are these school board members voting on that impact crime in your community, the educational level of people who go out in society and think that the president impacts zoning in your community? That is the problem. We have to be connected and engaged and informed civically to make change progressively. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Green Party, whomever you may want to be. I know conservatives have strong views in this country, liberals have their views, but I believe in order to be in the middle, we have to be able to progressively move forward to work across. We got to be able to work across the aisle. We can't even get people in the room, so they can't work, walk, reach across the aisle if they can't even be in a room together. And that's where we are. This is what our society is seeing, and the intentionality again to disenfranchise people of color, women, black men, people with disabilities, people who are lower income, Native Americans, LGBTQ plus IA. It's intentional and it's focused, and we have to be informed around how do we make this work together for us to work in the middle and be progressive. Now, next week, Speak Black Man returns for episode 3. You got to stay tuned to see what the conversation is going to be about, who's going to be on, and what we are talking about. Again, tonight's guest, Mr. Pre-K, his daughter is sick, sending prayers up for him and the family. But we are thankful that you tuned in. Listen, I hope that you share out this conversation tonight because, again, the more people that we fundamentally and intentionally educate about civic engagement, I promise you, we will see better results within our local communities and thankfully in the White House, because Ripley's, believe it or not, we do need entities of the White House like the Department of Education supporting there. So join me in closing out this episode next week. Episode 3 will be on at 7:15 p.m. This will replay next Monday at 7:15 a.m. for those who are in the morning drop off. I want to close us out on this. We are more than a dream. We are more than a stereotype. We are more than fear and anger. We must share our stories, lift our heads, and speak Black man. Until next week, peace and love, everybody. Thank you.